Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are coming at you with another Tavour review. This is another single brewer review, and if you've seen many of my videos, just judging by the can labels, you probably know what's in store. We have got another Imperial Stout review from Hubbard's Cave out of Niles, Illinois. Today, we are going to be trying two different flavors of Imperial Stouts. Though I should have been this, and I never mentioned this prior, the reason that these are sweet is because of the addition of lactose. So technically speaking, these are Imperial Milk Stouts. They just classify them as Imperial Stouts. So that's what I've said. I'll leave it at that. You can categorize it and subcategorize it however makes you happy. But nonetheless, today on the docket, we have got their chocolate and strawberry pot de crème. This is 12% ABV, brewed with chocolate, strawberry, vanilla bean, and lactose. And then number two is their hazelnut pot de crème. Again, 12% ABV. This one's brewed with chocolate, hazelnut, vanilla, and lactose. So if you're, hazelnut, but it's got chocolate in it, and the vanilla and the lactose, I expect maybe they're aiming for kind of a Nutella vibe. So we shall see. Nonetheless, I absolutely love Hubbard's Cave Stouts. I've had their IPAs as well. Everything I've had by Hubbard's Cave, I really enjoyed. I expect these will be no different. I've had many of their beers now, and I'm very much looking forward to jumping into both of these. So we're going to do exactly that. Starting with the chocolate and strawberry pot de crème Imperial Stout at 12% ABV. Okay, so jumping right into beer number one of today's single brewer, single style Tavour review. Hubbard's Cave Chocolate and Strawberry Pot de Crème. This is an Imperial Stout clocking in at 12% ABV. Hubbard's Cave, again, is based out of Niles, Illinois. This specific beer has been brewed with chocolate, strawberry, vanilla bean, and lactose, which is what sweetens it. So as I stated in my intro, you could properly and correctly classify this as an Imperial Milk Stout. They just say an Imperial Stout, so I'll leave it at that. Nonetheless, label art, as always, it's basically devoid of any. Very simple label with the name of the beer. There's some slight something in the background, maybe cars driving down the highway. I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, let's get this one cracked. I'm going to be gentle here. All right. And I expect this will be pitch black and thick as molasses. And indeed, I was correct. It is pitch black and thick as molasses. All right, I'm going to try to give a bit quicker agitation to try to form a head, but theirs are so thick, they don't normally do that great in the head department. No, it looks like maybe my agitation and timing did better than I usually do. Visually, it is absolutely pitch black. As always, you cannot see a hint of light through a Hubbard's Cave Imperial Stout. Head actually did hold and form okay. It's going to break down pretty quickly because even though it's a big, thick beer, they're pretty effervescent and pretty active in the carbonation. I can see on the sides of the glass, it's coming up very quickly, very active. You can't see it. It's just too dark. But nonetheless, looks great. I can tell you, most of their beers have a very pronounced aroma. This is no different. I can already smell it from here, and it smells wonderful. So let's get closer, just a little closer to see what it smells. It smells absolutely delicious. It smells like a beautiful mix of chocolate and strawberry. Little vanilla undertone, but dominant strawberry. I'd say that's about 65 to 70% of the aroma that comes through, and chocolate 20-25%ish, and vanilla just under that. It smells great. I mean, it just absolutely smells great. I'm going to finish topping that off. All right, we don't want to waste any of this goodness. So, looks great, smells great. Let's jump in. Oh, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Okay. This is exactly what I've come to expect from Hubbard's Cave Imperial Stouts. I just haven't had a bad one. I don't know if they make a bad one. Something tells me no. They just do them so bloody well. This is absolutely delicious, and it's absolutely as advertised. Chocolate and strawberry, just galore. And then it's got the little underlying vanilla bean to kind of richen it up in the back. It kind of puts me in mind of Neapolitan. We did a Neapolitan milk stout review from Saugatuck several episodes back. This does put me in mind of that quite a lot. Just a much bigger beer here. There is still that kind of boozy edge that you get with Hubbard's Cave, big ABV Imperial Stouts. It's there, but it's not as pronounced on this one. The lactose really does add that layered richness to sweeten it up, and just the natural brightness of the strawberry cuts through, and then the chocolate becomes more like a sweetened, semi-sweet, almost like semi-sweet chocolate chips you might put in cookies. That's what it reminds me of, and then this richness from the vanilla undertone. It is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to jump back in for body mouthfeel and finish and start to explore how these flavors develop. Body on this one feels medium heavy to me. Mouthfeel doesn't feel as viscous as some that I've had. This one seems to be a bit more active in terms of carbonation. When you do agitate it around the palate, it does get quite creamy though, and adds to that layered thickness. But just getting it in your mouth, I'd say medium heavy for the body. Maybe medium light for the mouthfeel. It's not quite that viscous, but it's nice. I got to jump back in because there's a lot of activity happening with the layers and flavors and exactly how they develop. So I'm going to go in for just one more sip here to make sure I get it right. First get in your mouth, it's just this big burst of sweetness. And the strawberry really plays heavily on the front. Kind of the same thing happens in the flavor that happens in the aroma. The strawberry's on top, roughly 2/3 dominant to 1/3 of the chocolate, and the vanilla is very much an undertone. They're all there. You can pick all of them out easily. But that's roughly the ratio. The strawberry is the dominant. The chocolate's underneath that, and the vanilla is just kind of in the background to richen it up. And really, in terms of how the flavor peaks, it doesn't get crazy intense and just build and build and build like a lot of beers. It's kind of intense out of the gate, and it just holds there, very flat, until it finally starts to kind of peter off in intensity. And this is pretty much just like all of the other Imperial Stouts I've had by them. The finish on each sip is quite long. They're big, bold beers. They're very flavorful, and the flavors do stick around the palate for quite a long time on each sip. I can still taste quite clearly just a boatload of strawberry and chocolate and that vanilla undertone. It's all in there, and it's still going. I mean, it's probably been pushing 30 seconds since that last sip I had, and it's still as present all over my palate as it was when I took the sip, really. Very long finish. Very clean, big, wet, nice finish, just full of flavor. This is, for my money yet again, just another fantastic offering by Hubbard's Cave. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get the beer number 2. This is the Hazelnut Pot de Crème Imperial Stout, 12% ABV, brewed with chocolate, hazelnut, vanilla, and lactose. Okay, now moving on to the second beer of today's Hubbard's Cave Single Brewer Tavour Imperial Stout review. We have got the Hazelnut Pot de Crème. This one, just as the first, clocks in at 12% ABV, and this one's been brewed with chocolate, hazelnut, vanilla bean, and lactose. So just as with the prior, you could correctly categorize this as an Imperial Milk Stout. Nonetheless, judging off of that bill, I really do think maybe they're going for kind of a Nutella vibe here in beer form, since it's got the chocolate paired with the hazelnut, plus the lactose and the vanilla under there to richen it up. So I'm really excited to jump into this one. And yet again, just as with the first, in terms of label art, there's not much, so to speak. It's very faint. You'll never pick it up, but it looks like some cars driving under an overpass. Very exciting, but nonetheless, let's get this cracked. Be gentle. All right. And I imagine this will look like the first. Very thick and very dark. Oh, so thick and dark. This one seems like it's got a pretty good shot at pouring a bit thicker head. I could be crazy, but it was just the way it was coming out. That lactose really clouded it up. I thought maybe it was a bit of some beer head attempting to get going, but that's okay. As expected, again, this is an absolutely pitch black beer. You cannot see light through this thing at all. It is pitch black. And again, as with the prior, it's got a very pronounced aroma, so you can smell it from quite a good distance, though not quite as pungent as the other. So I'm going to get right over this glass, get a bigger sniff. Yeah, it smells fantastic. I'll be honest, this one smells quite a bit boozier than the prior. You can smell the sweetness and the booze and the hazelnut and the chocolate. The vanilla I'm not really picking up at all, but I can definitely pick up the chocolate and the hazelnut and this really boozy undertone. So we're going to jump right in. Just give this one a sip. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. Okay, that tastes pretty much exactly as I expected. It does put me in mind of Nutella in beer form, and that's just fantastic. This is a big beer. This one feels much bigger than the prior in terms of intensity of flavor and also in terms of the booziness that comes through. It's quite pronounced in this one. I've noticed that some of their beers, the boozy nature comes through quite a bit more than in others. I don't know what the reason for that is, and honestly, I don't complain. For me, in a 12% ABV beer, no matter the style, a little booze back, you know, honestly, for me, it's welcome. It lets you know you're drinking a high ABV beer. I don't shy away from that, so long as it's not imposing, which it's not in this. Just the denseness, richness of the flavor profile and that added lactose that sweetens it up and just makes it a big dessert beer, a little boozy back. It's very enjoyable. I think, you know, of myself sitting in, say, a ski lodge in the middle of winter, you know, after a long day on the slopes, because I'm an expert skier, if you didn't know. I'm kidding. I've never skied a day in my life. But sitting in a ski lodge after a long day on the slopes, roaring fire, you know, you ate a nice meal and you're sitting down and enjoying a nice big dessert beer to finish your day. That's what these beers put me in mind of. And I think it would be wholly appropriate. This is fantastic. I'm going to jump back in for body mouthfeel finish and see if I can start thinking about where these flavors develop. Body on this one feels a bit heavier than the prior. I'd say it's still medium heavy, but a little heavier than the prior. Mouthfeel, it's got some viscosity, but it's not as super crazy thick feeling as a lot of their Imperial Stouts I've had. I'd say it's a medium, borderline medium heavy thickness. And again, at 12%, this big and thick and lactose added, I kind of expect it to be a bit more viscous, but nonetheless, that's where it sits. It still feels more or less appropriate for the ABV range and the type of beer when it's in your mouth. It does have presence, don't get me wrong. It's not flat. It definitely has presence. It's just not quite as heavy, which depending on your preferences, that could be a good thing or a bad thing if you want a heavier feeling beer or maybe not quite as heavier feelings. But at 12%, yeah, for me, I don't want to have it be flat and be drinking it very quickly and then it sneaks up on you. I like to enjoy it over the long haul with a body and mouthfeel that matches. But yeah, it's really nice. I'm going to jump in again for the flavor elements here. It's got a lot happening. You first get it in your mouth as you roll it around the palate. You get that sweetness. As soon as you swallow, you get the sweetness and a nice booziness that comes through for the first few seconds. And it's really an even mix. Well, it's not quite even. I'd say it's 60-40 hazelnut chocolate. The vanilla just kind of mixes with the others, and it's just this undertone of richness that kind of richens it up, makes it, you know, it's like the de crème side of the pot de crème. It's that vanilla added. And it really pairs quite well. This probably is realistically about as close as one could get to having Nutella in beer form, for my money. I don't know if anybody's tried to brew a Nutella beer, just actually using proper Nutella, but hazelnut, chocolate, little vanilla bean, lactose undertone. This is a really, really well put together ingredient list for coming close to it. It's really quite nice. The hazelnut comes through very, very clearly. The chocolate behind it, so it doesn't get overpowered by the chocolate. The hazelnut is the star, as it should be. It's Hazelnut Pot de Crème. I think they nailed the balance of ingredients in this, I would dare say, perfectly. I think if there was a tweak on either side, it could be a bit overpowering on any of them, and it all just works very well in harmony. So after all of those flavors kind of open up and come into their own, they really hold there. It doesn't get ridiculously intense in terms of flavor intensity, but kind of like the first, it just kind of holds there for quite a while before it starts its slow, steady descent. So it kind of ramps up on you very, very quickly, and then just kind of holds a plateau, and then a slow, steady descent out to the end. And really, where you're left lingering on the end is that slight sweetness, just the mildest hint of booziness that still lingers, and just that beautiful hazelnut on top, the chocolate underneath. Again, never really get the vanilla flavor in and of itself per se, but it's definitely in there and works to help richen up the beer. It really, really is nice. I like what they did with the flavors, and I like how it's balanced. This is a very well put together beer, as I have come to expect from Hubbard's Cave. This is another winner. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both beers, we're going to get them ranked, starting with the chocolate and strawberry pot de crème. Again, Hubbard's Cave is based out of Niles, Illinois, and these are Imperial Stouts, so technically they are Imperial Milk Stouts, but they just term them Imperial Stouts, so we'll leave it at that. Chocolate and strawberry pot de crème is brewed with chocolate, strawberries, vanilla bean, and lactose. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was super pungent. You could smell it from a very great distance away. It's top tier. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste, I really, really enjoyed the taste on this. Overall, I thought they absolutely nailed it. For my money, even though I really appreciate that the strawberry didn't get lost, because it's an easy flavor to get lost when you're pairing with other stuff in a beer malt bill, but frankly, it actually overpowered the chocolate a little bit much. I would have liked a little bit better balance, but I only docked 1 point because it was really great. I give it a 9. For the body, make no mistake, this beer had a very big body. You know, it was medium heavy to heavy, but at 12%, and certainly compared to other Hubbard's Cave Imperial Stouts I've had, it was a little lower than I anticipated. So I did dock some points there. It gets above average, it gets a 7. For the mouthfeel, I was actually really surprised by the mouthfeel on this. Normally they're very thick, very big, very viscous, very oil or molasses-like. There's just a lot of substance and that thickness rolls around the palate. This was really just kind of average, and frankly it was low end. I scored it accordingly. It gets a 4. For the finish. Finish on this beer is very, very long. Hubbard's Cave's beers have big, bold, pungent flavors, and they're big beers anyway, and they tend to linger around the palate. This was no exception. Each sip, you know, it did its thing, and it just kept going and going and going. Even after the end of the descent, you're still just picking up all of these flavors, and they just linger very long on each sip. It is top tier in that respect. It gets a 10 out of 10. Head and retention? Head and retention on this one surprised me. It did great. Their beers are very, very thick. The heads I've gotten from them, especially on their Imperial Stouts, kind of run the gamut, but this one was excellent. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Appearance, you couldn't ask for better. It's absolutely pitch black. It's a 12% ABV Imperial Stout. No light through it at all. Pitch black. Perfect 10 out of 10. Balance on this. Overall, I did think it was a very well balanced beer, and it's certainly a very enjoyable beer to drink. That said, I stand by. The strawberry was actually a bit oppressive compared to the chocolate. I would have liked a more even balance of both chocolate and strawberry, and I kind of understand why they did it. Strawberry as an ingredient has a tendency to get drowned out, especially by big ingredients like chocolate that are pairing with a big roasty malt bill that makes an Imperial Stout. But you add in that lactose, and it actually helps accentuate the fruit flavors, and it actually really kind of overrode the chocolate a fair bit. I could pick them out, but the balance was off for me. I did dock some points here. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Still above average, but just a 7. Filling in the intangible. Nitpicking specific categories aside, I really did truly enjoy this beer. I thought it was fantastic. It put me in mind with another recent beer that I've had, relatively recent. We did several episodes back, a Saugatuck Neapolitan Milk Stout. I don't believe that one was Imperial, but it was chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. And this put me immediately in mind of that beer, and they're both fantastic in their own right. This is just a much bigger version, and I really loved it. There were just a few things I would have tweaked to give it top marks, but I only docked 1 point. I gave it a 9. Finally, as an example of the style. Again, I really enjoyed this beer. I thought it was well put together, and I think that most people that like this type of beer absolutely would love it. If you like chocolate, you like strawberry, you like stouts, you like sweetened stouts, milk stouts, imperial stouts, take your pick, run a gamut of many different beers, and I think this is a beer you would very much enjoy. It absolutely was enjoyable, but there were a few key areas where it just lost too many points for me to give it the top marks. I did think it was above average, and I gave it a 7. That brings the total score on Hubbard's Cave Chocolate and Strawberry Pot de Crème to an 83 out of 100. So this is indeed a well above average beer. Certainly well worth seeking if you're a fan of Hubbard's Cave, Imperial Stouts, or just want to try something new. I do recommend this one. It was very enjoyable indeed. Moving on to beer number 2. Another Pot de Crème release. This is the Hazelnut Pot de Crème. 12% ABV, just as with the prior beer. This one, very similar bill, but slight deviations. It also has chocolate and hazelnut, vanilla bean as well again, and lactose. So this really, to me, before I even touched it, cracked it, opened it, smelled it, tasted it, I thought to myself, this is going to be Nutella-like. And indeed, I was correct. So let's go through the numbers. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this one, this was another beer that you could smell from a reasonable distance away that was nowhere near as pungent as the top tier, and certainly night and day difference between the two. But still well above average, it gets an 8 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely enjoyed the taste. For me though, I come back to this again. Even though the hazelnut was the star, the fact that I know they put these other ingredients in it, and especially since it's going with the pot de creme kind of side, I would have liked a little more accentuation on the chocolate and a little more on the vanilla bean. I couldn't pick it up in either beer really in the aroma or in the flavor profile. That's really the creme side of the pot de creme, after which they're named. It did add some richness, but the vanilla flavor never really came through, and it would have paired just absolutely beautifully in both. I did dock 1 point. I gave it a 9. For the body. The body on this one felt more substantive than on the prior. No question about it. It was certainly above average, but again, comparative to other Imperial Stouts in this ABV range and certainly other Hubbard's Cave, it wasn't top tier, but certainly well above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. For the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel was definitely more viscous than on the prior. I thought it was average and kind of leaning above average, kind of on that border, and I ranked it so. I gave it the high end of average. I gave it a 6. Finish. Just as with the first beer, the finish on this beer is very long. Hubbard's Cave beers tend to be very intense, big, bold flavors that really stick around the palate. This was no different. Every sip lasted a ludicrously long time. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Moving on to the head and retention. This was the one category that just, I wish I didn't have to rank it, but this just did not form a head at all. I thought it was going to at first, and then I realized that's not foam, cream type fine bubbles I'm seeing getting ready to form a beautiful head. That's actually just the lactose cloudiness I'm seeing, and I went super aggressive, and it barely got the tiniest bit of a head, and it was gone within about 2 seconds. It gets a 1 out of 10. Appearance-wise, just as with the first, this was textbook Imperial Stout, pitch black, can't see through it. It gets a 10 out of 10. Balance-wise, I basically thought the same thing on this beer, but overall, based on the flavor profile and how they put it together, I think that this one was more well put together. Hazelnut's a pretty pungent ingredient, and they were not shy about it. And the chocolate came through a lot more clearly in this beer. It really was more 60-40 hazelnut to chocolate in this one versus the ratio in the strawberry chocolate, but it still had that vanilla bean undertone to kind of add in the creme side of the pot de creme. I would have liked a little more of that vanilla to come through. Like if I could have just detected it, other than adding depth to the overall beer experience, if the flavor came through, I think it would have been perfection. But for me, I had to dock 1 point. I gave it a 9. Feeling in the intangible. I love this beer. As with the first beer, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was very well put together. I always love Hubbard's Cave Imperial Stouts. I get my hands on as many as I possibly can. They put out all sorts of interesting flavor combinations, and they're all interesting and unique in their own right. This one for me, just a few minor tweaks that I would have made personally to my bill. But it was a very enjoyable beer. It really did remind me of drinking Nutella in beer form, and frankly, it was fantastic. Just a few little minor tweaks to keep it from top tier status. I docked 1 point. I gave it a 9. Finally, as an example of the style. Again, just as with the prior beer, another fantastic Imperial Stout by Hubbard's Cave. They really do a great job, and they're always coming up with interesting and new flavor ideas to throw into their beers. And we, the consumers, we get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Frankly, for me, I love them all. But when I'm being objective here and rating across multiple categories, and they do lose points, I have to take that into consideration. It lost some big points on the head and retention. And frankly, the mouthfeel still, I would have liked a little more there. A few little points in other categories, you know, kind of nitpicky, but it did lose a few in some critical categories. I did dock 2 points. It gets an 8 out of 10. That brings the total score on Hubbard's Cave Hazelnut Pot de Crème to a 78 out of 100. So all total, we're only looking at a 5-point spread here, and both of these are certainly well above average offerings. And if you're a fan of Hubbard's Cave beers, Hubbard's Cave Imperial Stouts, or just Imperial Stouts in general, or the sweetened stouts, milk stouts, you're absolutely going to love these. They are both an absolute treat, and I do think they're well worth seeking because they were both incredible beers. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to keep in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, just click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.